The gravy has to be perfect. That is the rule. It doesn't matter if my hip feels like someone is grinding broken glass into the joint or if my hands are shaking from nerves I can't quite control. The gravy has to be perfect because everything has to be perfect. That is the lie I have told myself for 40 years. I stood over the stove in my kitchen in Chattanooga, stirring the drippings from the turkey with a wooden spoon. The smell should have been comforting. It was the smell of sage, roasted poultry, and caramelized onions, the scent of every Thanksgiving I have hosted since I was 25. But today, the smell just made me nauseous. I glanced at the clock on the microwave. 1 p.m. They would be sitting down in 10 minutes. My hip gave a sharp throb, radiating down my leg, reminding me that I am 67 years old, and I have been on my feet since 5 in the morning. I leaned my weight against the counter, taking a shallow breath. I didn't want to breathe too deep. Lately, breathing deep felt heavy, like there was a weight sitting right in the center of my chest. That was the fear talking. 10 days. It had been 10 days since the biopsy. I stirred the gravy harder, watching it thicken. The doctor had told me it was just a routine checkup, a precaution because of the shadow on the scan. But I saw the look on his face. I'm old enough to know when people are managing my emotions. He was worried. He told me the results would be back in 3 to 5 business days. It had been 10 business days. The phone had rung plenty of times. Telemarketers, a wrong number, the pharmacy, but never the hospital. Every time it rang, my heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought it might crack them. But I hadn't told anyone how scared I was. Not even Patricia, especially not Patricia. Mom, do you need help bringing the bird out? Patricia's voice cut through the noise of the exhaust fan. She didn't come into the kitchen, though. She shouted it from the living room, where she was sitting on my sofa with her husband, Tom, watching the pregame show. I've got it. Honey, I yelled back, my voice steady. Just make sure the kids are washed up. I always had it. That was the dynamic. I was the engine that kept this family running, and they were the passengers. I gripped the heavy roasting pan with oven mitts, wincing as the weight pulled on my shoulders, and carried the turkey to the dining room. The table looked beautiful. I had ironed the tablecloth yesterday. The good china was out. The centerpieces were arranged just so. It looked like a magazine spread. It looked like a happy family lived here. Patricia looked up from her phone as I set the turkey down. She looked beautiful, I'll give her that. She has my hair, thick and dark, though she highlights hers now. She was wearing a new sweater, cashmere by the look of it, and scrolling through something on her screen. Looks great, Mom, she said, not looking up. Thanks, Patty. Tom wandered in, holding an empty beer bottle. Smells good, Carol. You outdid yourself. Sit down, everyone, I said, untying my apron. Before it gets cold. We all sat. The scraping of chairs, the clinking of silverware, the noise of the grandkids arguing over who got the drumstick. It should have been warm. It should have felt like love. But as I looked around the table, I felt a cold draft that had nothing to do with the weather outside. I served Tom. I served Patricia. I cut meat for the little ones. I made sure everyone had stuffing and cranberry sauce. Finally, I put a small slice of white meat on my own plate. I pushed it around with my fork. I couldn't eat. The silence in my head was louder than the conversation at the table. They were talking about Tom's job, about the kids' soccer practice, about a trip they wanted to take next summer. Normal things. They were eating my food, sitting in my house, planning their future. And I didn't know if I had a future. I couldn't take it anymore. The question had been burning a hole in my throat all morning. I needed to know if they knew something. Patricia was listed as my medical proxy. If the hospital couldn't reach me, they would call her. I waited for a lull in the conversation. Tom was chewing a mouthful of stuffing. Patricia was reaching for the salt. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice light, casual. "Did the hospital send the biopsy results yet?" "It's been 10 days. The reaction was instant, though if you weren't looking for it, you might have missed it. The chewing stopped, just for a split second. The room didn't go silent, not exactly. The TV was still murmuring in the other room. The kids were still kicking each other under the table, but the air around the adults changed. It grew tight, sharp. Patricia froze with the salt shaker in midair. She didn't look at me immediately. She looked at Tom. It was a quick flicker of the eyes, a darting glance that screamed panic. Tom looked down at his plate, suddenly very interested in his mashed potatoes. Then Patricia turned to me. She smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "No, Mom," she said. Her voice was too smooth, too rehearsed. "I called them yesterday. Actually, they said they're just really backed up with the holidays coming up. You know how it is. Admin work." She took a bite of turkey, chewing enthusiastically. "This is delicious, by the way." I watched her hand as she lifted her fork. On her wrist was a watch I hadn't seen before. It was an Apple Watch, one of the new ones with the big screen. I know how much those cost because my grandson had been begging for one, and I told him it was too expensive. Patricia had been complaining about money for months. She had told me they were tight because of Tom's hours being cut. She had asked me to cover the grandkids' private school tuition this semester because they were short. But there was a $500 watch on her wrist, and there was a lie in her mouth. They said they were backed up. I repeated, keeping my face blank. "Yeah," Patricia said, waving her fork dismissively. "Totally swamped. Don't worry about it, Mom. No news is good news, right? Eat your turkey." She went back to her meal. Tom took a long drink of water, still refusing to meet my eyes. My stomach turned over. A cold, hard knot formed right under my ribs. I have been a mother for 40 years. I know when my children are lying. I know the specific pitch of Patricia's voice when she is trying to hide something. I heard it when she was 16 and snuck out to a party. I heard it when she was 25 and maxed out her credit card. And I heard it now. They weren't backed up. The hospital hadn't lost my file. Patricia knew. She knew the results. She had known them yesterday, or maybe the day before. She had spoken to the doctor. And for some reason, she was sitting here, eating the turkey I cooked with a hip that felt like it was on fire. And she was choosing not to tell me. Why? If it was good news, she would have shouted it from the rooftops. She would have said, "Mom, you're clear. Let's celebrate." If she was hiding it, that meant it was bad. Or it meant something else. I looked at Tom again. He looked guilty. Not sad. Guilty. There is a difference. Sadness is heavy. Guilt is fidgety. Tom was fidgeting. He was wiping his mouth with his napkin too many times. He was checking his phone under the table. I looked back at Patricia. She was scrolling on her new watch, tapping a notification, looking annoyed at a text message. She wasn't worried about my cancer. She was worried about something else. I looked down at my plate. The turkey looked dry. The cranberry sauce looked like blood. "Okay," I said softly. "I guess I'll wait." "Exactly," Patricia said, visibly relieved. "Just wait. Pass the gravy." I passed her the gravy. I watched her pour it over her potatoes, drowning them. My heart wasn't hammering anymore. It had stopped racing and settled into a slow, heavy thud. The anxiety was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. They were lying to me. In my own house. At my own table. I gripped my fork, my knuckles turning white. I didn't know what the truth was yet. I didn't know if I was dying or if I was fine. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to wait for the hospital to call me back. And I certainly wasn't going to wait for my daughter to decide I was important enough to be told the truth. I took a bite of the turkey. It tasted like ash. I needed to use the bathroom, and I needed my cell phone. "Excuse me," I said, pushing my chair back. The wood scraped loudly against the floor, but no one really looked up. "I'll be right back." "Take your time, Mom," Patricia said, her mouth full. She didn't offer to help me up, even though she knows how stiff my hip gets after sitting for too long. I walked out of the dining room, keeping my back straight. I could hear them as I moved down the hallway, the clinking of silverware, the murmur of the TV, and then a burst of laughter. It was Tom laughing at something Patricia said. They were relaxed. They were happy. They were enjoying the meal I had spent 2 days preparing, completely unbothered by the fact that they were lying to my face. I stepped into the guest bathroom and locked the door behind me. I didn't just turn the lock. I checked it twice. My hands were trembling so badly, I almost dropped my phone into the sink. I turned the faucet on. I cranked the cold water handle all the way to the right, so it rushed out in a loud, steady stream. It's an old trick. I used to do it when the kids were babies, and I just needed 5 minutes to cry without anyone hearing me. The sound of the water creates a wall. It blocks out the world, and more importantly, it blocks the world from hearing you. But I wasn't going to cry. Not yet. I sat on the edge of the bathtub because my legs felt too weak to hold me up. I unlocked my phone and went to my contacts. My thumb hovered over the number for Chattanooga Memorial Oncology Department. It was Thanksgiving Thursday. I knew the main offices were closed, but Dr. Evans had given me a direct line for the on-call nurse coordinator. He had given it to me just in case you have symptoms over the weekend. I had never used it. I didn't want to be a bother. I pressed the button. The phone rang, and rang, and rang. "Pick up," I prayed silently. "Please, God, let someone pick up." My heart was hammering in my throat, matching the rhythm of the ringing. I stared at the bath mat, tracing the pattern with my eyes, trying to keep from passing out. "Oncology, this is Nurse Sarah. How can I help you?" The voice was efficient, professional, and startlingly loud in the small tiled room. "Hello," I whispered. I cleared my throat and spoke louder, trying to sound like I was in control. "This is Carol Delgado. I'm a patient of Dr. Evans." There was a pause. "Happy Thanksgiving, Mrs. Delgado. Is this an emergency? Are you having pain?" "No," I said quickly. "No pain. I mean, my hip hurts, but that's not—" "Listen, I need to know about my biopsy results. I was in 10 days ago. I haven't heard anything." Silence on the other end. I heard the clicking of a keyboard. The sound was so distinct I could picture her typing my name into the system. The water in the sink kept rushing, a white noise backdrop to the most important conversation of my life. "Date of birth," the nurse asked. "March 12th, 1958. More typing. Then the typing stopped. "Mrs. Delgado," the nurse said. Her tone had changed. It wasn't just professional anymore. It was confused. "You haven't heard anything?" "No," I said. "I've been waiting by the phone every day." "That's strange," she said. "I'm looking at your chart right now." The pathology report came back. "Last Monday. We called your contact number on Tuesday morning." My stomach dropped. "Which number did you call?" "We called the primary number on file," she said, "ending in 4545. We spoke to your medical proxy, Patricia Delgado. We couldn't reach you directly, so Dr. Evans spoke to her. We mailed the full written report to her, addressed the same day." The room seemed to tilt sideways. That was Patricia's cell phone, the phone that was currently sitting on my dining room table next to the cranberry sauce. She spoke to Dr. Evans?" I asked. My voice sounded thin, like it was coming from someone else. "Yes, ma'am," the nurse said. She confirmed she would relay the information to you and help you schedule the follow-up. We've been waiting for you to call to book the surgery. Dr. Evans wanted to get you in as soon as possible, considering the findings. Surgery. Findings. Is it? I couldn't finish the sentence. The nurse sighed softly. Mrs. Delgado, did your daughter not tell you the diagnosis? No, I whispered. She told me you were backed up. She said she hadn't heard anything. Oh, dear, the nurse said. I am so sorry. That is not correct. The results are positive, Mrs. Delgado. It's stage 1 adenocarcinoma. It's early, which is the good news, and it is treatable. But time is a factor. We need to remove the mass. We sent the surgical packets to your daughter's house last week. I sat there on the edge of the tub, the cold porcelain pressing against my legs. Cancer. I had cancer. And my daughter knew. She knew last Tuesday. She knew on Wednesday when she called to ask if I could pick up the kids from school. She knew on Friday when she came over for coffee and complained about her husband's boss. She knew this morning when she watched me lifting the heavy roasting pan into the oven. She knew I had a tumor growing inside me, and she let me believe everything was fine. Mrs. Delgado, are you still there? I'm here, I managed to say. We need to get you on the schedule, the nurse said gently. Can you come in Monday morning at 9 a.m.? We can bypass your daughter and set this up directly with you. Yes, I said. Monday at 9 o'clock. Just me. Don't call her. I made a note of it. And Mrs. Delgado, try to have a good Thanksgiving. It is treatable. We will take care of you. Thank you, I said. I hung up the phone. I sat there for a long time. The water was still running, wasting gallons, but I couldn't move to turn it off. It wasn't the cancer that scared me. I had suspected the cancer. I'm a tough woman. I can handle sickness. I can handle surgery. I couldn't handle the betrayal. Why? Why would she hide it? Why would she intercept a letter meant for me? Why would she look me in the eye 5 minutes ago, check her watch, and lie? Her watch. The thought hit me like a physical slap. The Apple Watch. The new sweater. The casual way she mentioned admin work. If I was sick, I would need money. I would need care. I would need the funds I had set aside in the family trust, the trust my late husband and I built to protect us in our old age. Patricia had access to that trust. She was the co-signer, solely so she could pay my bills if I was incapacitated. But I wasn't incapacitated. I was just in the dark. A horrible, sinking suspicion started to form in my gut. It was a thought so ugly I wanted to push it away. Mothers aren't supposed to think these things about their children. We are supposed to believe the best. We are supposed to make excuses. Maybe she wanted to protect me through the holidays. I told myself, maybe she didn't want to ruin Thanksgiving. But you don't protect someone by lying about a surgery they need. You don't protect someone by letting them carry heavy turkeys when they have a tumor. I stood up. My knees popped, but they held. I walked to the sink and turned off the faucet. The sudden silence in the bathroom was deafening. I looked in the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked tired. Her gray hair was a little frizzy from the steam of the cooking. Her eyes were rimmed with red. There were deep lines around her mouth from years of worrying about everyone else. That was the old Carol. The old Carol would have washed her face, gone back out there, and pretended nothing was wrong until the guests left. The old Carol would have waited until Monday to confront Patricia gently, asking her why she forgot to mention the call. The old Carol would have forgiven her before she even apologized. I looked closer at my own eyes. I have cancer. I don't have time for the old Carol anymore. I splashed cold water on my face. I scrubbed the skin until it tingled. I grabbed a hand towel and dried myself off, harsh and quick. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to scream. I was going to find out why my daughter was wearing a $500 watch while her mother had untreated cancer. I unlocked the bathroom door. I didn't go back to the dining room. I turned left, down the hall, toward the small room we used as a home office. They were busy eating pie. They wouldn't miss me for another 10 minutes. And 10 minutes was all I needed to see what else Patricia had been hiding. I walked out of the bathroom, and the noise of the house hit me like a physical wave. The football game was blaring from the living room TV, the roar of the crowd, the blow of a whistle, the excited shouting of the commentators. It was the soundtrack of a normal Thanksgiving, but nothing about today was normal anymore. I walked past the dining room table. It was still cluttered with the remains of the meal. Half-eaten turkey, a mound of mashed potatoes hardening on a serving platter, dirty napkins crumpled like discarded tissues. Usually, I would have stopped. I would have started stacking plates, soaking the silverware, and wiping down the tablecloth before the stains set. That was my job. I was the cleaner, the cook, the fixer. Today, I walked right past the mess. I stepped into the living room. Patricia and Tom were sitting on the sectional sofa, their feet propped up on the coffee table. My coffee table, the one I yell at the grandkids not to put their shoes on. Patricia was scrolling on her phone again, that shiny new watch glinting under the recessed lights. Tom was nursing a second beer, cheering as a player ran across the screen. They looked so comfortable. They looked so secure. Mom. Patricia didn't look up from her screen, but she sensed me standing there. Are we doing pie soon? The kids are asking. The audacity took my breath away. I had just learned I had cancer. I knew she was hiding it, and she was asking me to serve her dessert. Not yet, I said. My voice sounded steady, which was a miracle. I have a migraine coming on. The heat in the kitchen got to me. I need to sit in the quiet for a bit. Tom glanced over, his eyes barely leaving the TV. Take some Tylenol, Carol. Don't want to miss the halftime show. I'll be fine, I said. I'm just going to go into the office and close my eyes for a few minutes. Keep an eye on the kids. Okay, Patricia said, finally looking up with a faint, dismissive smile. Feel better. We'll save you a slice. I turned my back on them. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't heartbreak anymore. It was lighter than that. It was the feeling of a cord being cut. I walked down the hall to the small back room we called the office. It used to be my husband's sanctuary. Now, it was just a room where I paid bills and stored old tax returns. It smelled like dust and old paper. I closed the door, and just like in the bathroom, I locked it. I sat down in the creaky leather chair. It was cold in here. I didn't turn on the overhead light. The gray afternoon light filtering through the blinds was enough. I pulled my iPad out of the desk drawer. My hands were shaking again, but not from fear this time. They were shaking from adrenaline. I needed to see the money. 5 years ago, after my husband passed, I sold the lake cabin. It was the only big asset we had left. I took that money, $45,000, and put it into a high-yield savings account. We called it the medical trust. It wasn't a fancy legal trust, just a joint account. I had added Patricia's name to it 2 years ago when I had my first hip scare. What if you fall and can't get to the bank, Mom? She had said. Put me on the account so I can pay the hospital directly. It's for your safety. It made sense at the time. It sounded like love. I woke up the iPad screen. The blue light illuminated my face. I tapped the banking app icon. Please, I thought. Please let me be wrong. Let her be a liar, but don't let her be a thief. I typed in my password. It took me 2 tries because my fingers were clumsy. The little loading circle spun round and round. I held my breath. The dashboard popped up. Total assets, $432.18. I stared at the screen. I blinked, thinking maybe I had forgotten my glasses, or maybe the decimal point was in the wrong place. I leaned in closer. $432.18. The air left the room. There should have been over $30,000 in there. I hadn't touched it. I lived off my Social Security and my small pension. That money was my safety net. It was my chemo money. It was my surgery money. It was the money that was supposed to keep me from being a burden on anyone when I got old. It was gone. I felt a wave of nausea, so strong I had to grip the edge of the desk to keep from throwing up. "Where is it?" I whispered to the empty room. I tapped the tab that said transaction history. The list populated, scrolling down the screen in neat, terrifying rows. It wasn't one big withdrawal. It was a slow bleed. A death by 1,000 cuts. I scrolled back to last month, October 15th, the Palms Resort and SBA, Miami, $8,240. I froze. October 15th. I remembered that week. Patricia had told me she was going to a regional sales conference for work. She said the company was paying for everything. She had even asked me to watch the kids for 4 days. I had watched her children, cooked their meals, and drove them to school, thinking my daughter was working hard to support her family. She was on a vacation she paid for with my life savings. I scrolled down further. November 1st, Southern Ford dealership, $3,500. I looked out the window. Through the slats of the blinds, I could see Tom's truck parked in my driveway. It was a beast of a thing, shiny and black. He had told me he traded in his old sedan and got a steal of a deal. He didn't get a deal. I bought him that truck. I paid the down payment. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. Hot and angry. They were driving my money. They were tanning on beaches with my money. But then I saw the date that made my blood run cold. November 14th. Apple Store, $1,200. November 14th. That was 3 days after my biopsy. That was the day after the doctor told me he was very concerned about the mass. Patricia knew. By November 14th, she might not have had the official letter, but she knew I was sick. She knew I was waiting for results. She knew there was a very real chance I would need expensive medical care. And she walked into an Apple store and bought herself a watch. She didn't just steal from me. That would be bad enough. Children steal from parents all the time. It's an old story. This was different. This was betting against me. She spent the money because she didn't think I would need it. Or worse, she spent it because she didn't care if I needed it. She saw her mother facing a life-threatening illness, and her first instinct wasn't to conserve resources. It wasn't to circle the wagons and protect the family. Her first instinct was to drain the account before the hospital bills started rolling in. It was predatory. I looked at the transaction again. $1,200. I thought about the turkey dinner. I thought about the lie. They're backed up, Mom. She wasn't protecting me from bad news. She was stalling. She was buying time to figure out how to hide the fact that the money was gone. She knew that once I got the cancer diagnosis, the first thing I would do is check the trust to pay for the surgery. She intercepted the letter to buy herself a few more days of freedom. I sat back in the chair. The leather creaked loudly in the silence. I looked at the family photo on the desk. It was taken 5 years ago, right before Henry died. We all looked so happy. Patricia was smiling, her arm around me. Tom was holding the baby. I realized then that the woman in that photo, me, was a fool. I had spent my whole life giving. I gave them the down payment for their first house. I gave them free childcare. I gave them love, patience, and the best years of my life. And in return, when my life was on the line, they took the last thing I had. My hand stopped shaking. The nausea passed. A strange calm settled over me. It was the calm of a soldier who realizes the diplomacy is over. The peace talks had failed. The enemy wasn't at the gate. The enemy was eating pumpkin pie in my living room. I took a screenshot of the bank balance. I took a screenshot of the Miami charge. I took a screenshot of the Ford dealership charge. I took a screenshot of the Apple Store charge. I emailed them all to myself. And then I texted the images to my lawyer, Mr. Henderson. He was probably eating turkey with his own family, but I didn't care. I needed a timestamp. I closed the iPad cover. The snap sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. I had a headache, for real this time. It was pounding behind my eyes. But I also had something else. I had the truth. They thought I was a helpless old woman. They thought I was Granny, who just cooked and cleaned and believed whatever they told her. They thought I would die quietly and leave them the house, too. I stood up. I wasn't going to die quietly. I walked to the door and unlocked it. I could hear the halftime show starting on the TV. I needed to go back out there. I needed to look them in the face one more time. But I wasn't ready to scream yet. Screaming is for people who are helpless. I had one more test for them. I wanted to see just how far they were willing to go. I smoothed my sweater, took a deep breath, and opened the door. It was time for dessert. I stood with my hand on the doorknob of the home office, my palms sweating against the cold brass. Through the wood, I could hear the muffled sounds of the football game and the clatter of forks against plates. They were eating dessert. They were probably wondering where I was, or maybe they were relieved I wasn't there to ask any more uncomfortable questions. I had the iPad clutched to my chest like a shield. This was the moment. This was the turning point. I knew exactly what would happen if I opened that door and started screaming. I've seen it happen in other families. If I walked out there and threw the iPad on the table and yelled, "You stole $40,000 from me," the dynamic would shift instantly. Patricia would cry. She is excellent at crying. She would make herself the victim. She would say, "Mom, we were drowning. We were going to pay it back. How can you care about money more than your own daughter?" Tom would get defensive. He would say I was overreacting. He would say, "It's a loan, Carol. We're family." They would gaslight me. They would twist the narrative until I was the mean, stingy old woman hoarding cash while her children struggled. They would use my grandkids as leverage. They would promise to fix it, and I, because I am a mother who loves her child, would eventually cave. I would let them off the hook. And then, on Monday, I would go into surgery with no money, no security, and a daughter who knew she could get away with anything. I looked down at the carpet. I had two choices. Choice A, be the mother. Go out there, yell, cry, demand an apology, and hope they fix it. Choice B, be the survivor. Secure my safety first, and ask questions later. I thought about the cancer growing in my body. The doctor said it was aggressive but treatable. Aggressive. That word stuck in my mind. The cancer wasn't waiting for an apology. The cancer wasn't going to be polite. The cancer was trying to kill me. If I wanted to live, I had to be just as aggressive. I took my hand off the doorknob. I turned back to the desk. Some people will say what I did next was cold. Some people will say it was too harsh, that I should have given them a chance to explain that you don't do this to family on Thanksgiving. But those people aren't facing major surgery in 4 days with an empty bank account. I sat back down in the leather chair. I picked up my phone. I didn't call Patricia. I didn't call Tom. I turned the phone over and looked at the number on the back of my debit card. 24-hour fraud, and security department. I dialed. My heart was beating so hard it felt like a bird trapped in my ribcage. I felt sick. I felt like I was betraying them, which is ironic, considering they had already betrayed me. Thank you for calling First National. For lost or stolen cards, press 1. I pressed 1. Please hold for the next available representative. I waited. The hold music was a terrible, tinny jazz tune. I stared at the door, praying Patricia wouldn't come in to check on me. If she walked in right now, the whole plan would fall apart. I needed to strike while they were distracted by pumpkin pie. Security department, this is Mark. Can I have your card number? Yes, I said. My voice was shaking, so I cleared my throat and made it firm. I gave him the number. Thank you, Mrs. Delgado. I see you're calling from the registered cell phone. How can I help you today? I need to report unauthorized activity on my account, I said. The joint savings account ending in 8890. Okay, Mark said. His voice was calm, detached. I can help with that. Which charges are you disputing? All of them, I said. Every withdrawal made in the last 60 days. The charges to the Palms Resort in Miami. The transfer to Southern Ford. The charges at the Apple Store. None of them were made by me. I heard the typing on the other end. Okay, Mrs. Delgado. I see these were made with a secondary debit card issued to a Patricia Delgado. Is that correct? This was the test. This was the moment I could turn back. Yes, I said. And is Patricia Delgado authorized to use these funds for personal expenses? Mark asked. I closed my eyes. I pictured Patricia's face. I pictured her lying to me about the hospital. I pictured her wearing that watch while I limped around the kitchen. No, I said, she is not. The account was set up for medical emergencies. Only. These transactions are theft. The word hung in the air. Theft. I understand. Mark said. His tone became more serious. Mrs. Delgado, because the amount exceeds $10,000 and involves a joint account holder, this triggers a specific fraud protocol. We will freeze the account immediately. No money will go in or out. We will also open an investigation. If we determine this was fraud, we may involve law enforcement. Do you want to proceed? I didn't hesitate. Freeze it. Freeze it all. And mark the transactions as disputed. Done, Mark said. The account is locked. The card issued to Patricia Delgado has been deactivated. Is there anything else? No. Thank you. I hung up. It was done. When Patricia tried to buy gas tomorrow or groceries or pay for another round of drinks, that card would be a useless piece of plastic. But I wasn't finished. The bank account was only half the problem. The bigger problem was Monday. I had a surgery scheduled. When you go under anesthesia, you have to designate a decision maker. Someone who decides what to do if things go wrong. Someone who decides if they should resuscitate you or let you go. For 10 years, my designated decision maker has been Patricia. I looked at the phone again. It was a holiday. Lawyers don't work on Thanksgiving. But Jim Henderson wasn't just my lawyer. He was my late husband's best friend. He had drafted the trust. He had warned me years ago, Carol, give her access if you want, but keep the power. I scrolled to his name in my contacts. Jim Henderson, cell. I hit call. It went to voicemail after 4 rings. I was relieved. I didn't want to have a conversation. I just needed to go on the record. Hey, you've reached Jim. Leave a message. Jim, it's Carol. I said. I made sure my voice was loud and clear. I know it's Thanksgiving, and I'm sorry to bother you, but this is an emergency. I took a deep breath. I need you to revoke Patricia's power of attorney. Immediately. Effective right now. Today, Thursday. I am asserting that I am of sound mind and body. I am revoking her status as my medical proxy and my financial agent. Do not, I repeat, do not let her make any decisions for me. I paused. I needed to give a reason, just in case this went to court. I have discovered that she has misappropriated funds from my medical trust. I do not trust her with my life. I am going in for surgery on Monday. I will sign whatever papers I need to sign on Monday morning, but I want this verbal record time-stamped now. Call me when you get this. I ended the call. I put the phone down on the desk. My hands were freezing cold. I had just fired my daughter. I had just cut off her money and stripped her of her power. And she was sitting 30 feet away, eating my food. A wave of guilt washed over me, heavy and suffocating. Am I a bad mother? I asked myself. Is this too much? Should I have given her a chance to explain? Then I looked at the screenshot on my iPad again. November 14th. Apple Store. She bought a watch while I waited for a cancer diagnosis. No, I wasn't a bad mother. I was a mother who had finally stopped being a doormat. I stood up. My legs felt steadier now. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I wiped my face. I checked my reflection in the darkened window. I didn't look like a victim. I looked like a woman who just took care of business. I wasn't safe yet. The confrontation was still coming, but I had secured the perimeter. The money was frozen. The legal power was revoked. Now, whatever happened next, they couldn't hurt me any more than they already had. I unlocked the office door. The smell of pumpkin pie wafted down the hallway. It smelled sweet and spicy, masking the rot underneath. I walked back down the hall. I could hear Tom laughing. "Man, did you see that catch?" he yelled. "Incredible," Patricia said. "Hey, I wonder if Mom fell asleep in there." "I'm awake," I said. I stepped into the living room. They both looked up. Patricia smiled, a piece of pie halfway to her mouth. "There she is," she said. "Feeling better?" "Much better," I said, and I meant it. I walked over to the table. There was one slice of pie left in the pan. "Did you want some?" Patricia asked. "I can warm it up." "No," I said. "I'm not hungry." I sat down in the armchair across from them. I folded my hands in my lap. I looked at Patricia. I looked at Tom. I looked at the expensive watch. I looked at the truck keys on the table. They had no idea that their credit card was dead. They had no idea that their legal power was gone. They were sitting there, fat and happy, thinking they had gotten away with it. I needed to wait just a little bit longer. I needed to lead them into the trap. "Actually," I said, putting a worried look on my face, "I am feeling a little anxious, Patricia." She sighed, putting her fork down. "About the biopsy, Mom? I told you, they're just backed up." "I know," I said, "but I'm worried about the money. If I do need treatment, is the trust fund okay? I had a bad dream that the account was empty." I watched her face closely. This was the final test. If she told the truth now, if she broke down and confessed, maybe, just maybe, I would call the bank back. I waited. Patricia rolled her eyes. She picked up her fork again. "Oh my God, Mom," she said, chuckling. "You have such an imagination. The money is fine. It's sitting right there earning interest. Stop stressing yourself out." There it was. The final nail in the coffin. She didn't just lie to protect me. She lied to protect herself. "Okay," I said softly. "As long as it's safe." "It's safe," Tom said, looking at his phone. "Safe as houses." I smiled. "Good to know." I leaned back in the chair. I watched them eat. "Enjoy it," I thought. "It's the last free meal you're ever going to get from me." I sat back down at the head of the table. It's my spot. It's been my spot for 30 years, ever since my husband, Henry, decided he preferred sitting on the side, so he could be closer to the kitchen. Now, sitting there felt different. It felt like a judge's bench. Patricia was already sliding a slice of pumpkin pie onto a dessert plate. She licked a bit of whipped cream off her thumb. It was such a childish, carefree gesture. It made my stomach churn. She looked up at me and smiled, that bright, practiced smile she uses when she wants something or when she's trying to manage me. "Coffee, Mom?" she asked. "I made a fresh pot. Decaf, just how you like it." "No, thank you," I said. "I'll just have water." I watched her pour a cup for herself and one for Tom. They were so synchronized. They moved like a team that had decided I was the opponent. The grandkids had run off to the basement to play video games, leaving the three of us alone in the dining room. The remnants of the turkey dinner had been cleared away, replaced by the dessert spread. It was intimate. It was quiet. It was the perfect setting for a betrayal. I took a sip of my water. It was time. I needed them to say it. I had the screenshots. I had the bank records. I knew the truth, but I needed to hear it come out of their mouths. I needed to know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that there was no misunderstanding. I needed to know that they were looking me in the eye and choosing to deceive me. I cleared my throat. I let my shoulders slump a little, making myself look smaller, older. I put on the mask of the worried grandmother. It's a mask they were used to. They liked that mask because it made them feel superior. "Patricia," I said, my voice trembling just enough to be convincing, "I know you said not to worry, but I can't help it. My mind is just racing." Patricia sighed, putting her fork down with a little clatter. She exchanged a look with Tom. It was a look that said, "Here we go again." "Mom, please," she said, her voice dripping with exaggerated patience. "It's Thanksgiving. Can we not do the doom and gloom thing? The doctor hasn't even called yet." "I know," I said, "but if he does call, if it is bad news, surgery is expensive. The deductibles, the aftercare, the medication. Medicare only covers so much." I paused. I looked directly at her. I watched her pupils. "I need to know we're ready," I continued. "Is the trust fund still sitting at 25,000? I know we had a little more in there originally, but 25 is the safety number. I might need to go to the bank tomorrow and withdraw it just in case they need a deposit for the procedure." The air in the room seemed to freeze. This was the exit ramp. This was the moment she could have said, "Mom, we need to talk. We borrowed some money. We're sorry." If she had said that, I might have still been angry, but I wouldn't have been destroyed. Patricia didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She picked up her coffee cup and took a slow sip. "Mom," she said, chuckling softly, "stop stressing. Seriously, you're working yourself up over nothing." "But the balance," I pressed, "is the 25,000 there?" "Yes," she said. The word hung in the air. Simple. Sharp. A lie. "It's all there," she continued, slicing into her pie with surgical precision. "I checked it last week when the statement came in. It's sitting right there, earning interest, safe and sound. You don't need to go to the bank tomorrow. In fact, you should probably just rest. If you need anything, I'll handle the payments. That's what I'm here for, right?" She smiled at me. It was a benevolent smile. The smile of a daughter taking care of her aging, confused mother. I looked at Tom. Surely he would crack. He was never as good at lying as she was. "Tom," I asked, "did you see the statement too?" Tom was stuffing a large bite of pie into his mouth. He swallowed hard, wiping crumbs from his lip. He wouldn't meet my eyes at first, but then he forced himself to look up. "Yeah, Carol," he said, nodding enthusiastically. "You worry too much. The money is safe. Patricia is on top of it. You've got a great nest egg. Just enjoy the holiday." "Safe as houses," Patricia added. "Safe as houses," I repeated. I looked at the watch on her wrist. I looked at the new truck keys sitting on the sideboard. I thought about the luxury resort in Miami. They weren't just lying to cover a mistake. They were gaslighting me. They were telling me the sky was green when we could all see it was blue. They were banking on the fact that I was too old, too tired, or too trusting to double-check them. They thought that if they just kept saying, "It's fine," I would believe it was fine. They were treating me like a child they had robbed. And the worst part, they were eating my pie while they did it. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was a quiet, final click, like a lock turning. The fear I had felt about the cancer evaporated. The guilt I had felt about calling the bank vanished. The hesitation I had about ruining Thanksgiving was gone. I looked at my daughter. I really looked at her. I saw the arrogance in her face. She thought she had won. She thought she had successfully managed the old lady for another day. She was probably already planning how to shuffle money around next week to hide the theft. Or maybe she was planning to tell me the insurance covered it, so I wouldn't notice the missing cash. She underestimated me. She underestimated how much fight I had left. I sat up straighter in my chair. I let the worried grandmother mask slip away. I stopped trembling. I stopped looking small. I picked up my fork. I didn't eat. I just held it. "You're right," I said. My voice was different now. It was lower, colder. Patricia paused, her fork halfway to her mouth. She sensed the shift. She frowned slightly. "What?" I smiled at her, but it wasn't a mother's smile. It was the smile of a predator who has just watched the trapdoor slam shut. "You're absolutely right, Patricia," I said, locking eyes with her. "I shouldn't worry." "See," she said, relaxing. "I told you." "No," I said. I really shouldn't worry about money I don't have." Patricia froze. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, placing my hands flat on the table, "that there is no use worrying about a trust fund that doesn't exist anymore." The room went dead silent. The only sound was the humming of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Tom stopped chewing. Patricia's smile faltered, the corners of her mouth twitching. "Mom, you're talking crazy," she said, a nervous laugh bubbling up. "I just told you." "I know what you told me," I interrupted, "and I know what the bank told me." I reached under the table and pulled out the iPad I had hidden on my lap. I placed it on the pristine tablecloth right next to the centerpiece. The screen was still glowing. I called the bank. "Patricia," I said softly, and then I called the hospital. The color drained from her face so fast it looked like she might faint. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "So," I said, leaning forward, "let's try this conversation again. And this time, let's skip the part where you treat me like an idiot." The silence in the dining room wasn't peaceful anymore. It was heavy, like the air right before a thunderstorm breaks. My iPad sat on the tablecloth between the pumpkin pie and the crystal water pitcher, glowing with the evidence of their betrayal. Patricia stared at the screen. She didn't look at the numbers. She looked at the device as if it were a bomb that had just landed on her dinner plate. "You checked the account," she whispered. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. "I checked the account," I confirmed, my voice steady. "And then I checked your purse." Patricia's head snapped up. Her eyes went wide. "You went through my purse?" When I cleared the salad plates, I said calmly, "I saw the corner of a Memorial Hospital envelope sticking out of your bag, the one you left on the sideboard. I thought maybe you had picked up a prescription for me. But it wasn't a prescription, was it?" I reached into the pocket of my cardigan. I pulled out the crumpled envelope. I had been holding onto it for the last hour, the sharp edges pressing against my hip, burning a hole in my pocket. I tossed it onto the table. It landed right on top of the iPad. "Open it," I said. Patricia didn't move. She stared at the envelope with her name on it, care of Patricia Delgado, stamped in red ink. I said open it. My voice cracked just once, sharp and loud. Tom jumped in his seat. He looked from the letter to me, his face flushing a deep, angry red. Carol, what is going on here? He demanded, his voice booming. You're digging through our personal belongings? You're hacking into bank accounts. It's Thanksgiving, for God's sake. Hacking. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Tom, it is a joint account. My name is on it. My money is in it. Or rather, my money was in it. I pointed a shaking finger at the letter. That letter says I have adenocarcinoma. It says I need surgery immediately. It says the mass is aggressive. I turn my finger toward the iPad, and that screen says you spent $8,000 on a spa trip to Miami while I was waiting to find out if I was going to die. I looked at my daughter. The hospital didn't call, Patricia, because this letter says they mailed the surgical packet 10 days ago. And the bank didn't call because this alert says you drained the account to buy a truck and a watch. Patricia finally moved. She pushed her chair back, the legs screeching against the hardwood floor. She didn't look ashamed. She looked annoyed. She looked like a teenager who had been caught skipping school, not a grown woman who had embezzled her mother's life savings. Mom, you are blowing this way out of proportion, she said, waving her hands in the air. We didn't steal it. We borrowed it. It's a loan. A loan. I repeated. Did you ask me for a loan? We were going to pay it back, she shouted. Tom has a bonus coming in January. We were going to put it all back before you even noticed. We didn't want to worry you. You didn't want to worry me? I stood up slowly, gripping the edge of the table. You left me in the dark about cancer for a week. So, you could buy a Ford F-150? You call that not worrying me? We needed a break. Patricia yelled back, tears finally starting to well up in her eyes. But they were angry tears. Do you have any idea how hard it is for us right now? Tom's hours got cut. The tuition went up. We haven't had a vacation in 3 years, Mom. 3 years. We were drowning. We just needed to breathe for a second. We deserve that trip. I stared at her. I looked at the woman I had raised, the woman I had rocked to sleep, the woman I had bailed out of trouble a dozen times. You deserved a vacation, I said quietly, with my chemotherapy money. You don't even know if you need chemo yet, she snapped. See, you always do this. You assume the worst. We were betting on you being fine. We thought the biopsy would be negative, and we'd have the money back in the account by Christmas, and no one would get hurt. And what if I wasn't fine? I asked, what if, like right now, I needed that money on Monday morning? Patricia stammered. We would have figured it out. We would have put it on credit cards. God, Mom, why are you being so selfish? It's just money. We're family. Everything that's yours is supposed to be ours eventually anyway. The words hung in the air, ugly and naked. Eventually, anyway. She meant when I died. She was spending her inheritance early because she figured I wouldn't be around to use it. Tom slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. That is enough, he barked. He stood up, towering over the table. He tried to use his size to intimidate me, something he had done subtly for years. You are out of line, Carol. You invite us into your home, you feed us, and then you ambush us. You're spying on us. I checked that account, too. I saw the alerts. I thought you approved the transfer. Liar, I said. I looked him dead in the eye. You knew. You drove that new truck here today. You knew exactly where the down payment came from. You didn't think I approved anything. You just thought I was too old and too stupid to notice. I am not sitting here and being insulted by my mother-in-law. Tom spat. Patricia, get the kids. We're leaving. No, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it stopped him cold. You're not leaving yet. You're going to listen to me. I picked up the iPad. I swiped to the next image, the one showing the fraud alert confirmation number. You say you were going to pay it back. I asked, well, you're going to have to explain that to the bank. Patricia froze. What did you do? I called the fraud department while you were eating your pumpkin pie. I said, I reported the transactions as theft. I reported them as unauthorized use by a secondary cardholder. Mom, Patricia gasped, her face turning a sickly shade of gray. You didn't. I did, I said. They froze the account. They froze your card. And they are opening an investigation. If the amount is over $10,000, which it is, they turn it over to the police. Police! Patricia shrieked. You called the police on your own daughter. I called the bank on a thief. I corrected her. You made the choice to be a thief. I just made the choice to protect myself. Fix it, Tom growled, stepping toward me. Call them back right now and tell them it was a mistake. Tell them you forgot you authorized it. If this hits my credit report, I lose my security clearance at work. You will ruin us, Carol. You ruined yourselves, I said, not backing down an inch. I didn't buy the truck. I didn't go to Miami. I didn't buy the watch. I reached for my phone, which was sitting next to the pie plate. And there is one more thing, I said. I called Jim Henderson. Patricia flinched at the lawyer's name. I left a voicemail activating the revocation clause. I told her, as of 10 minutes ago, your power of attorney is gone. You are no longer my medical proxy. You are no longer my financial agent. If I go into a coma on that operating table on Monday, the doctors will look to the state to make decisions, not you, because I don't trust you to keep me alive if it costs you money. Patricia burst into tears. Real tears this time. The tears of someone who realizes the safety net has been cut, and they are falling. Mom, please, she sobbed. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. We got in over our heads. Please don't do this. Not the police. Not the lawyer. We can fix this. It's too late to fix it. I said, you had 10 days to fix it. You had all dinner to fix it. You had the moment I asked you about the trust fund to fix it. You chose to lie every single time. I looked at the table, the half-eaten pie, the coffee cups, the wreckage of a holiday. I am done, I said. I am done being the bank. I am done being the servant. And I am done being lied to. I pointed to the door. This dinner is over, I said. Take your children. Take your new truck. And get out of my house. But, Mom, Patricia wailed. Get out. I shouted, the anger finally breaking through the calm surface. Get out before I call the police myself and have them escort you out. Tom grabbed Patricia's arm. He looked at me with pure hatred. You're going to regret this, Carol. You're going to be a lonely old woman. I'd rather be lonely than broke and dead. I said, I watched them scramble. I heard them yelling for the kids in the basement. I heard the confused cries of my grandchildren as they were dragged upstairs. I heard the front door slam shut. The house fell silent. I stood there for a long time, listening to the sound of the truck engine roaring to life in the driveway. I looked down at the hospital letter on the table. Adenocarcinoma. I had a war to fight on Monday, but I had just won the first battle right here in the dining room. I didn't stay in the dining room. I couldn't. The adrenaline was pumping through my veins so hard my hands were shaking, not from age, but from rage. I walked to the front window and pulled back the sheer curtain. Outside, the November air was turning gray and cold. My driveway, usually empty and peaceful, looked like a crime scene. Tom was throwing the kids' backpacks into the bed of that shiny new black truck, the truck they had bought with my life savings. He was slamming things around, angry and embarrassed, cursing under his breath. I saw my grandson, Leo, looking out the back window. He looked confused. He looked scared. Seeing his little face broke my heart, but then I looked at the front seat. I looked at the leather interior. I looked at the heated seats. I looked at the technology on the dashboard. That truck wasn't just a vehicle. It was my chemotherapy. It was my hospital stay. It was the security I had worked 40 years to build, sitting on 4 rubber tires. Patricia hadn't gotten in the car yet. She was standing by the passenger door, talking frantically to Tom. Then she looked back at the house. She saw the curtain move. She saw me. She didn't get in the truck. She started walking back up the driveway. I opened the front door and stepped out onto the porch. The cold air hit my face, drying the sweat on my forehead. I wrapped my cardigan tighter around myself. I didn't cross my arms. I stood tall. "Mom," Patricia called out. She stopped at the bottom of the steps. Her face was blotchy from crying, her mascara running down her cheeks. She didn't look like the arrogant woman who had snapped at me over turkey an hour ago. She looked like a child who had broken a vase and wanted me to fix it. "Go home, Patricia," I said coldly. "We can't just leave like this," she pleaded, walking up one step. "It's Thanksgiving. You're kicking us out on Thanksgiving." "You kicked yourself out," I said, "when you decided to steal from me." "It wasn't stealing," she screamed, stomping her foot. "Why won't you listen? We were going to put it back. But you had to go nuclear. You called the police. You called the bank. Do you know what you've done?" I protected myself. I said, "You destroyed us," she shouted. She pointed back at the truck where the kids were watching. "Look at them, Mom. Look at your grandchildren. How can you do this to them?" If Tom loses his clearance because of a fraud investigation, he loses his job. If he loses his job, we can't pay the mortgage. We can't pay tuition. You are hurting Leo and Sarah. Is that what you want? To punish innocent children just to prove a point. There it was. The grandchildren card. The ultimate weapon. She knew I loved those kids more than breath itself. She knew I had paid for their braces, their camps, their clothes. She was using them as human shields to protect her own greed. I looked past her, at the truck. "I'm not hurting them," I said, my voice shaking with the effort to stay calm. "You are. You spent their security. You spent their grandmother's health. If I die because I can't afford treatment, who is going to pay for their tuition then?" "You're not going to die," Patricia yelled. "You're being dramatic." "I have cancer, Patricia," I shouted back. The word echoed in the quiet cul-de-sac. "I have cancer, and you bought a truck. Look at it." I pointed a trembling finger at the Ford F-150. "That is a $60,000 truck." I said, "Do you know how much a round of radiation costs? Do you know how much the surgery costs? You are driving my survival." Patricia looked down at her boots. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand. We can sell the truck, okay? We'll sell it on Monday. We'll get the money back." "You can't sell it," I said, "because the bank has frozen your assets. That truck is evidence now." She flinched. She knew I was right. "But Mom," her voice dropped to a whimper, "we don't have the cash flow right now. If you cut us off, if you really revoked the power of attorney, we are going to bounce checks tomorrow. The mortgage is due on the 1st. Please, just call the bank back. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. For the kids. Please." I looked at her. I looked at the daughter who used to make me homemade cards with macaroni and glitter. I looked at the woman who had just looked me in the eye and lied about my own death. I realized something in that moment. If I saved her now, she would never stop. She would drain me dry until I was a husk, and then she would complain that I didn't leave enough in the will. I needed money. The trust was gone. The bank investigation would take months to clear up. I needed liquid cash for surgery next week. I only had one other asset. "I can't help you with your mortgage," I said softly. Patricia's face brightened, just a little. She thought I was cracking. I know, but if you just unfreeze the account. No, I said, you're not listening. I can't help you with the mortgage because you don't have a mortgage. Patricia looked confused. What? You rent, I reminded her. You rent the house on Elm Street. From me. It was true. 5 years ago, when they were struggling, they were always struggling, I had bought a nice 3-bedroom house in a good school district. I let them live there for half the market rate. It was my way of helping. My name was on the deed. Theirs was on a month-to-month lease. Yeah, so, Patricia asked, a new kind of panic entering her eyes. So, I said, leaning against the doorframe, I need to pay for my cancer treatment. My cash is gone because you stole it, so I have to liquidate my assets. Patricia stopped breathing. She stared at me, her mouth hanging open. You wouldn't, she whispered. I have to, I said. I can't afford 2 houses and chemotherapy. Not anymore. I took a deep breath. This was the hardest thing I had ever had to say. You have 30 days. I said, I am giving you verbal notice right now, and my lawyer will send the certified letter on Monday. I am selling the house on Elm Street. You're evicting us? Patricia screamed. It was a sound of pure disbelief. You're evicting your own daughter, your own grandchildren, on Thanksgiving. I am selling my property to pay for my medical bills. I corrected her. You have 30 days to find a new place. Maybe you can sleep in the truck. You are a monster, she shrieked. She rushed up the stairs, getting right in my face. You are a selfish, bitter old witch. I hope you die alone in this house. I hope the cancer takes you. The words hung in the air, ugly and poisonous. I didn't slap her. I didn't yell back. I just looked at her with pity. You better get going, Patricia, I said quietly. You have a lot of packing to do. I stepped back inside and closed the door in her face. I locked the deadbolt. I heard her screaming on the porch. I heard her pounding on the wood. Open the door. You can't do this. Mom. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door. My legs finally gave out, and I slid down to the floor, sitting on the entryway rug. I listened as she eventually gave up. I listened to her stomp down the stairs. I listened to the truck doors slam. 1, 2, 3, 4. I listened to the engine rev, aggressive and loud, and then the sound of tires screeching as they peeled out of the driveway. Then there was silence. I was alone. The house was big and empty. The smell of turkey was still lingering, but the warmth was gone. I sat there on the floor for a long time. I was crying. Finally, the tears I had held back all day came pouring out. I cried for the daughter I had lost. I cried for the little girl she used to be. I cried for the fear of the surgery on Monday. But beneath the tears, there was something else. A strange, solid feeling in the pit of my stomach. I had lost my family, but I had saved my life. I wiped my face with the sleeve of my cardigan. I looked at the hallway mirror. You're going to be okay, Carol, I whispered to the empty house. And for the first time in 10 days, I actually believed it. I stood up. I had to call the doctor. I had to call a realtor. I had a life to organize. 3 months is a long time when you are measuring it in chemotherapy cycles. I am sitting in the infusion chair at the cancer center. It is a big, ugly, brown recliner, but it is surprisingly comfortable. The machine next to me beeps rhythmically, pumping medicine into the port in my chest. It leaves a metallic taste in my mouth, like I've been sucking on old pennies. I am tired. It is a bone-deep tiredness that sleep doesn't really fix. My hair is gone, replaced by a soft blue silk scarf I bought online. But as I sit here, watching the winter rain streak against the window, I realize something strange. I am at peace. For the first time in 20 years, my heart isn't racing. I'm not worrying about someone else's mortgage. I'm not wondering if I need to pick up an extra shift to cover a tuition bill. I am just sitting here, fighting for my life, and that is enough. You want another blanket? Han? I look to my left. It isn't Patricia sitting there. Patricia hasn't been to a single appointment. It's Brenda. Brenda lives 2 doors down from me. We used to just wave at the mailbox, but the day that for sale sign went up on the rental house, she came over with a casserole and asked if I was okay. When I told her about the cancer, she didn't ask for a loan. She didn't check her watch. She pulled out her calendar and said, I drive on Tuesdays. You just be ready at 8. Brenda is holding a fashion magazine and a cup of lukewarm hospital coffee. She is here because she wants to be, not because she expects an inheritance. I'm okay, Brenda, I say, smiling at her. Thank you. The house on Elm Street sold 2 weeks ago. The market was hot, and it went for over asking price. The check cleared yesterday. My bank account, my own private account, is healthy again. I can pay for this treatment. I can pay for a nurse to come help me at home if I get too weak. I don't have to beg my daughter for the money she stole from me. Patricia and Tom moved out. They didn't go quietly. There were nasty text messages. There were threats of lawsuits that never materialized because they couldn't afford a lawyer. They moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. Tom had to sell the truck. I heard that through the grapevine at the grocery store. It gave me a grim sense of satisfaction. Not joy exactly, but balance. The scales had finally tipped back to even. The hardest part is the silence. I miss my grandchildren. I miss Leo's laugh and Sarah's hugs. That is the price I paid. Patricia has blocked my number on their phones. She is using them as a weapon, just like I knew she would. It hurts. I won't lie and say it doesn't. Some nights, I cry into my pillow because I miss them so much my chest aches. But then I remember the Thanksgiving table. I remember the lie. I remember the look on her face when she told me the money was safe while she was wearing it on her wrist. I realized that for years I was the glue holding that family together. People always say that like it's a compliment. Oh, Carol, you're the glue. But they forget what glue is. It's sticky, it's messy, and it only works if you spread yourself thin until you disappear. I was the glue, but the glue was made of my own blood and my own money. I was holding them together by letting them tear me apart. Now the glue is gone, and if they fall apart without me, that is not my fault. That is their consequence. The nurse comes over to check my vitals. Blood pressure looks good. Carol, she says, you're a tough cookie. I am, I say, and I believe it. I am sick. I am bald. I am alone in my big house, but I am not a victim anymore. I reclaimed my dignity in that dining room. I decided that my life was worth more than their lifestyle. I look out the window again. The rain is stopping. The sun is trying to peek through the gray clouds. I think about the future. Maybe when I am in remission, I will travel. Maybe I will join a book club with Brenda. Maybe I will rewrite my will and leave everything to the cancer center that is actually saving my life. The old Carol died at that Thanksgiving dinner. The new Carol is just getting started. I turn my head and look right at you. Yes, you. They say blood is thicker than water. It's the oldest saying in the book, designed to keep us trapped in toxic cycles. But what do you do when the blood turns poisonous? What do you do when the people who share your DNA are the ones holding the knife? I chose to survive. I chose to cut the cord before they dragged me down with them. Some people tell me I was too harsh. Some people say a mother should give everything, even her last breath, for her child. But I say a mother is a person, too. Would you have forgiven them? Would you have let them keep the money and hoped for the best? Or did I do the right thing by choosing myself? I really want to know what you think. What city are you listening from? And what time is it there? Write it in the comments. And if you'd like to help me keep sharing these emotional, thrilling stories every day, even a small donation makes a big difference. It truly helps keep the channel alive. For more life stories like this, you can explore the other videos on my channel and subscribe. On the screen, you'll see 2 new stories I'm sure you'll enjoy. Click one and start listening right away. With love.